as written. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving along. Approve the final plat of Southwest Country Estates.
As I have, there's a memo in the packet. I was going to say somewhat lengthy, but I don't want to. There are very few a couple of minor changes. One thing that I didn't note in my memo, the electric easements in the original preliminary plat showed utility easements for electricity at the back of lots 71 through 75. We are now, and I believe 84 through 78 as well. We have found that it works out better for us to have the electric in the front, so this plat conforms to current practice, but not to the preliminary plat. Staff has no problem and prefers it. The only other changes are, there don't appear on this plat. There was a couple of very minor elevation changes which the staff has approved. I think there were a couple of technical, very minor details, like the recorder of deeds has changed since the last time the plat was submitted, and as they shorted it, but that's corrected on this version that you have handed out today, and was so other than that, it should be ready for approval. Of course, the survey was done by Don Borman, and if you have any additional questions on the technical specifications, he could probably help you out there. I assume that when it comes to the time for voting for this, you'll have to recuse yourself right now.
It's not real conflict, but I probably should. It's more of a perception thing.
Yeah. The staff recommends approval as of the review. You will note, and since Plat 1, and between Plat 1 and the submission of this, there are two lots. Well, there are two pieces of land that were divided out from the full plat by lot split with surveys recorded. Those are noted on this plat, but will not be are not technically part of the subdivision? Or I guess they're, how does that work, Don?
Well, they're not technically part of the subdivision because they were platted outside of it. I think that they are probably still subject to the covenants because it basically applied to the whole area.
Right.
But they didn't really, I mean, they were done outside of the subdivision process. So they'll never have a description of the lot number.
We did, and I should have the preliminary plat here with me, but did you, in terms of the lot numbering, did the lot numbering change?
Yes, lot numbers changed
Yep.
because we didn't do it in the order in which the preliminary plat was numbered.
Right, okay. Oh, that's right, because I had the same thing on Kelly Court, because I think that's what the, so, I don't really have anything else to add. Any comments or questions? Staff can answer the best we can.
There are a couple of, they should be approved conditionally.
Oh.
Because we don't have the signatures and the improvements are not complete yet.
Right, right, oh, right, exactly. The streets is not quite complete.
And we don't have bond on the sidewalk.
Yeah, right. So the three conditions would be signatures from the owner, surveyor, and the bank. Of course, those have to be notarized, but that doesn't. And then the conditional upon the completion of the street improvements and the letter of credit on the sidewalks or bond.
Right. Has Mike already, or somebody already approved the sanitary sewers? I mean, have they passed, pulled the manhole and done that, the things that they need to yet?
There's still a repair that needed to be done.
Still
Oh, that's
repair
right.
Need to be done.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
don't know if that's been completed.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, that should be a condition also.
Yeah, right.
And really, it's just a condition that all the improvements that are required be completed, not necessarily just the streets.
Right.
So the four conditions would be signatures. Well, really, signatures, you can do it with three. Signatures, completion of improvements, which includes accepting the sewer, street, street curb and gutter, which, and then a letter of credit on the sidewalks.
Just to be safe, you probably ought to add storm sewer in there. I don't think there's a problem with it, but
Yeah.
that's just part of the
Right.
improvements.
Okay. You need the signatures, the completion of the improvements, which includes accepting the sanitary sewer, the storm sewer, and street and street including curb and gutter. And then the third condition is a letter of credit or bond on the sidewalks. So so the staff recommend conditional approval, or a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen for approval of the final plat of Southwest Country Estates with those three conditions being met.
We'll all speak at once.
If there are no comments or questions, motion to.
So we have a motion or discussion?
Move we accept the plat with the noted changes.
I'll second it. Have a motion and a second, all in favor? Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstentions?
Guy, you were the one who, Dale, you're the one who seconded it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. I hit that.
Moving on, review and possible changes to sign regulations and sections, I'm gonna read from various zoning districts. I
And,
honestly have questions about this.
okay. And we've got a presentation. Would you want that as part of the public hearing, or would you want that after the public hearing?
Your recommendation.
As much public as we have here, I don't really think
It doesn't really make that much difference. I would,
So we open the public hearing,
yeah.
let the gentleman speak.
The gentleman is Nathan Kuhn, he's my intern, so I'll turn on the. That's no gentleman, that's my intern.
I don't qualify. We probably should have taken a moment to introduce Nathan.
Okay.
Nathan. This is Nathan.
Hi,
This is
Nathan.
the
Slide down.
P&Z board.
My name is Nathan Kuhn. I'm a student at Mizzou for last year and for the year coming in the Masters of Public Administration and Nonprofit Administration. So I am Matt's assistant / intern for the summer, helping out. One of the things he's had me look at is the B1 district and the signage.
This is how you can fall asleep.
No. Okay, so forgive me if I'm a little meticulous. We don't need to read every word. I just want to go through these topics with you. The purpose of these slides is to bring up questions that the commission can discuss further in the future. And at the end, we also have some suggestions for potentially immediate action that will temporarily solve some things. But the overall recommendation is that if the city of Centralia wants the signage code to make more unified sense, it needs to be reworked almost completely. Because at the moment, the signage, anything about signs in the Centralia's code is scattered and has a lot of holes. Like there's a lot of conceptual things that could be in the code that aren't in there. So a lot of unexplained things. So
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, why just B1?
because it was easy. I went through it. I walked through B1. I took pictures of every business and assessed what was there. Matt has more information.
Actually, it's primarily because we know that there is a sign permit application coming from a business that will be in one of the buildings owned by the Prangers. And when I looked at the ordinance, we discussed this a little bit at one of the Board of Alderman meetings. They asked for a recommendation for planning zone. When I looked at the ordinance, the existing situation seems to be in conflict with the current ordinance because it seems to suggest that you can have either, and I think Nathan has the exact right language, you can have either a on-premise sign or an attached sign, in other words. Well, they've got both. And they've got both at the grocery store and they've got both at the Extreme Mart, in addition to signs for the gas station.
My question is more of a, let's say hypothetically you had a business in B1, which I think, sorry, my computer doesn't go bounce around.
Do you want to bring up map and B1?
Let's say you have a business in B1 that's in the same business as someone in M1, and you start restricting people in B1 with different rules than M1. Am I making sense here?
Yes. Well, it's the purpose of the different zoning districts is to have different levels of restrictions. That's why you have now. How you want to do that in terms of signage is entirely, but we do have some differences already. Typically, B1 is considered a downtown commercial district, and you have 0 lot lines, and not always, but and we've got a bevy of pictures to show that we probably have to just kind of relax things as they are to make either that or there's a lot of signs out.
Okay.
But yeah, so what maybe you may be right now you have a 100-foot tall sign in B2, and that's probably fine. I'm not sure you'd want a 100-foot tall sign downtown. So there are, it's entirely appropriate to have differences, but they,
I think my point's made.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Something attached in the minutes should be the Harrisburg.
Harrisonville.
Was that so? Was that in the minutes for today?
Impacted.
Again, we're not going to go through that, but that was a really good example of a city that has their code for signage consolidated into one section, and everything else in the zoning code references the sign section, and it's all very clearly laid out.
And Boone County's is also in there.
So those are two examples.
Is too complex.
I would suspect that would be true.
Boone County, similar, like in the same way where
Boone County is a lot simpler because it doesn't have all the different zonings. Yeah, it's just a lot simpler, and it doesn't cover as many topics as the cities would. So. All right, I will try and go through this fairly quickly, and then at the end we can have more discussion once we've gone through all the pictures and thought about things. Is that all right?
Thank you.
So, okay. The first problem is actually kind of the biggest one at the moment is that we simply have, if we interpret the code to mean you only have one sign, we have too many signs. So something to think about as we're talking about this, or what counts as a sign, because if it doesn't count, that is not counted in the numbers, and then how many of each kind is acceptable. because we can differentiate between that. The second problem is where these signs can be. The majority of signage in B1 is on the front street frontage of the buildings. There are some that have it on the side of the building. Some of those sides are street frontage, and some of those sides are alley frontage. And we'll get to that in a second. And other things we're not really going to talk about, just so you know, that are issues potentially, are what to do or how to define temporary signs. Same thing with directional signs that are off-site or even on-site. And then if the city wants to deal with flashing or bright signs or other special situations. So too many signs. So I walked through B1, I took pictures of every business, and I put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and I counted signs. Okay, so this is all subject to my interpretation of what a sign is and all these things. So these numbers are subject, and obviously that's part of the problem is we don't have signs defined in the code very well. So if, according to how at least I counted, 33 out of 60 businesses have 2 or more signs. So automatically over half of businesses are not following code if we just define it to mean 1 sign. So that's obviously a situation. One question as well is what counts as whether inside or outside of a window can count as a sign. I guess name wrong all the time. What is it? Harrisonville. We'll get there in a second how they define windows. So if you allow a sign that's stuck on the inside of a window to count, you have 48 out of 60 that have 2 or more signs. So what counts as a sign? Currently, there is no definition. When we have definition sections in the zoning or other places, it doesn't have sign and then the definition anywhere in the code. Harrisonville has a very strict definition, and Matthew pointed out we might not want to make Centralia as strict as Harrisonville, but this is an example of how they define sign, which is almost anything. It says symbols, colors, anything meant to advertise, identify, display, attract attention. It's a very broad definition.
So in their definition, my business, Centralia Barbershop, I have a sign with my name on it. It's not attached to the glass, but you can see it through the glass.
Yes.
That's one.
In there, we'll get there in a second. The windows
The
window's a technical one.
Decal on my front door, which says the name of the business, that would be 2.
And you got the pole.
Then I have a barber
And the
pole,
barber pole,
three.
3, yes.
Because it says there's a business there, it's a barbershop.
It's a symbol. It doesn't have to have words, according
That's
to
what
this.
I read in this.
Yeah. We'll get to it. I'll just jump there because I can move like that. Their definition for window sign. So they have a definition for window sign is anything placed upon the window panes or glass inside or outside the building. They can be seen through the glass. So if it's stuck against the glass, inside or outside, intended to be seen from the outside, it counts as a sign, according to them. So we don't necessarily have to do that here in Centralia, but they have a very strict definition of what sign is, and so yes.
I sort of encouraged him to not count what's inside, so.
Placed upon the window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's attached to the window, like-
That thing, it says upon the window pane, but yet,
Panes or glass.
and then,
And then the last sentence says signs that are intended to be viewed from the interior of the building. So the main point of this, if it's intended to be viewed from the outside, that's basically how they're doing it. They would count it there. So that opens up a lot, and we'll show you some pictures. That means a lot of, what was it, 48, 46 businesses would not follow the code. So we'll keep moving because we don't have to decide all this today. These are just things for you to think about as the commission. Okay, so this is our code. This is the B1 code. This is the section that Matt talked about that possibly could be interpreted to mean you can only have 1 sign. You don't really need to read it at the moment. The main thing is right here where it says where you're allowed either that the sign is attached or that it is detached. So you could interpret that to mean you can have one or the other, or you can mean that for each sign it can only be attached or detached, which might not make logical sense, but it could be interpreted to mean you can have as many signs as you want to. So again, it's not defined. So I'll move past that. You can reference that later. Essentially, it seems to suggest you only have 1 attached or detached. No limit is given on the other kinds of signs, and there's other kinds of signs that wouldn't fall under those 2 definitions. And again, we don't have the definition for a sign. 2 things that we are assuming at the moment as staff is that you want section 31.5-2B1, so that's the code that I just showed you, that you want that defined as anything on the exterior of the building, not including what is inside the window. So the moment when I'm counting signs We're not including those things that are against the inside of the window. But we could. You could in the future. So, let's clarify that. Types of signs. Again, I'm going to run through this briefly. These are just different kinds. Monument signs are the top two pictures. Pole signs the next one. These will be detached signs. We don't have a lot. There's only a couple in B1 district. But that would be those kinds of signs. An awning canopy sign would be any awning or canopy that has words or symbols or what could be qualified as a sign on it. A projecting sign obviously projects off the side of a building. Hanging would be hanging from something. I'm going quick because we probably don't need these. A lot of discussion. Projecting means, so these are 3 off the roof. If it kind of projects off the roof looking towards the street, if it's above the building or if it's flush on the roof. Fairly simple. A wall sign is anywhere on the wall. A window sign, and we talked about this. Window signs is kind of the biggest question because they're very obvious and we don't have exactly defined, and we already referenced this of the Harrisonville definition. Temporary signs, they come in lots of shapes and sizes, and since we don't have temporary sign defined in our code, any of these could or could not be temporary signs.
I think we do have a place where it's defined, but the temporary sign in our definition...
It's not defined. It said there's one place in B1 where it references sandwich signs and temporary signs, but then it doesn't clarify what those are. But it references temporary signs and sandwich signs can be outside a building as long as they're taken in at the end of business hours every single day.
Not all of our temporary signs are taken in at the end of business every single day.
Right? But that's all it says, though. And again, that could be interpreted a couple different ways. So standalone signs, including flags, banners, that portable display sign, Pranger's has one of those. And then posters and papers. If you stick a piece of paper on your door, does that count as a sign? Is that temporary? Is that permanent? And that's a question that needs to be defined.
And we're not going to get to the ridiculous extent that when the Rotary has their pancake breakfast or something, that if you put that sign, so we have to, I mean, no rational city would say that they have to get a permit to do that. That would be nuts.
But in general, we're not going to, this is all I'm talking about, the temporary signs today, unless you guys want to discuss it farther. But if the signage code was to be reviewed, temporary signs would be an issue, it would need to be clarified a fair amount. So here are some pictures. So the topic we're talking about right now is too many signs, right? So if you were saying you can only have one sign, you have a problem with the gas station. However, gas stations have a typical type of signage, and so the city could allow for gas stations to have special signing permission, right? Extra signs for gas stations because that's what's normal for gas stations. Yeah, so depending how you count it, you can have over 28 signs, depending how picky you want to be on what a sign means.
I remember, because it's not uncommon to have a special exemption for service stations, because they kind of have to advertise the price of gas.
If you'll notice, they have two, this sign right here and that sign right here are 2 pole exterior detached signs. There's actually 2 temporary signs right here. You have the signs on all 4 sides of the awning out here. If you really want to get picky, you can have 3 signs on each side over here, and you have signs on the building, etc., and so forth. So, the Kincaid Pharmacy is a long building. It's actually a little hard to see, but it has hanging signs underneath. These signs are on the outside of the windows, so they would count in our definition. Radio Shack has a different business license. That's not really clarified in our code, but it would make sense, at least to me, that they'd be permitted their own sign, but again, that's not clarified. Whether Kincaid Pharmacy, it looks like it's 2 different signs, whether that's 1 or 2 signs. They can have, again, so, and then what is temporary, inside or outside windows? Central Bank, is this 1 or 2 signs on the corner here? All these little comments in the windows, we do this more here. If it's on the outside, technically we would count it at the moment. If it's on the inside, we wouldn't. I didn't walk over and touch it, so I'm not exactly sure. But
and that's just, I mean, that's not written in the code. That's just what I told me.
Exactly, since we don't have it defined exactly. There's a symbol above the door that's in the stone. That could be a sign. And then again, we also have another bank in B1 district, and it's potentially we could give special permission to banks with drive-thrus because they have directional signs and additional signage, not really required, but kind of necessary for a drive-thru that could be allowed as a special exception, like gas stations might get special exceptions. So something to think Albert Shoe Repair, just, I mean, how many signs is that? I told Matt personally when I go to downtown, I think it's cool to have lots of signs. But that's just my personal opinion, and that's not necessarily what Centralia wants. I think signing is interesting in a downtown. But if the city wants to have a one-sign rule, then, I don't know, there's a lot there. And again, we noticed temporary sign with the banners. I mean, does this count? The Wolverine sign, is that temporary? Is that permanent? Matt wants me to go faster.
No. I just want to make sure. Just to make sure that my purpose here was not to try and say that these are all bad or we
No.
back. It's just that I'd like to come up with a definition, ideally that allows almost everything we have, and unless there's something that is offensive to the community that we need to curtail. That's and do minimal changes now just to make sure that this particular instance will fit within existing code. And then if we wanted to take on any of these other issues, you know, we could go at this could be fun for the next couple of years if you want. But anyway, so all right, go ahead.
And I totally agree with that. Essentially, whatever Centralia feels is good for our city, so it could be 1,000 signs or one. So, the First Christian Church, they have signs on every side of the building, and in some ways that kind of makes sense. If you're driving by on the other side of the block and you want to know what that building is, it might be nice to know and have a sign there. But at the moment, if we were interpreting it on one side, it wouldn't be allowed. And the cross itself, whether or not that could be interpreted as a sign or part of that other sign that's below it, again, with the Harrisonville very strict signs, that might or might not be. The Angel Insurance Company, they have multiple signs around the corner, different kinds of signs. The Martinsburg Bank and Trust, they have signs, a detached, attached, and attached on the back side, and they also have the drive-through. Again, so if the city wanted them to get special permissions for directional signs or other signs around the drive-through, they would qualify for that. This is an example of how Ritchie and Son has technically two signs if you're only counting what is exterior to the glass.
And those two are the True Value and the Ritchie's and Sons?
Yeah, the two up here. Because everything else is inside the glass. There are some paper signs on the merchandise, but if that was taken in, or if that's temporary, it wouldn't necessarily count in the two signs. But this also brings up another question: is if a business has a very wide frontage, should they be allowed more than one sign? I mean, this is a very wide store, and there's other examples of stores in B1 that, depending how the city wants to do, could have more than one sign because they have a very wide building, or because the building looks like multiple buildings. For example, the First Christian Church here has a couple different buildings almost that are all connected. And so it might or might not be reasonable to have a sign on each part of the building that looks different so everybody knows it's part of the same thing. So these are just things to think about. Problem number 2, signs in the wrong places. Well, I guess wrong probably is the wrong word here since we don't have to find where is good or bad in the code. It might or might not be bad. One thing that we were thinking about as we're looking at what might be good or bad in the side of a building is street frontage versus alley frontage versus not either one. So these blue lines are, actually I kind of messed up. There's actually a lot line right here between the bank and this. So there's actually a missing lot line right there. But these 3 signs we have noted are all facing towards alley frontage and not towards street frontage. So, so that's just examples of that. There are currently 7 out of the 60 businesses that I counted. I could be off on what counts as a business, but 7 out of the 60 currently have signs like these 3 that face towards alley frontage and not street frontage. And so if the city wanted to define that in any way, if we define it as allowing both street and alley frontage, we also have to consider that 36 other businesses, or potentially 44 other businesses, might have extra signs that they can put on their buildings, because that would open up opportunities. I think at the moment it seems like there's kind of an assumption that the signs should be pointed to the roads, because most businesses have that. There, again, only 7 out of 60 actually have signs anywhere else other than on road frontage. And so the city just needs to decide how we want to define that. Is that clear what I'm getting across on that slide? Okay. This is the other example. That parking lot, we believe, is a public parking lot, and it's a different lot. And so the signs that are on the mural side of the building are not facing, technically not facing road frontage or alley frontage. This is the only example of that. And so they could simply apply for an exception through the process that's currently in the code. They could apply for a conditional exception or a conditional, I don't know what conditional use permit, yeah. So,
Or variance.
Yeah,
or variance. So that is the one example that's not, the current sign that I noticed is not facing street or alley frontage. Other issues that we don't really have to get back into are temporary signs, off-site directional signs, or on-site. The central bank has 3 signs that are not on its premises, that are pointed towards its drive-through, because it's kind of in the center of the lot. Again, to me, again, this is my personal opinion, it kind of makes sense to have these, but the code doesn't really say yay or nay on that issue. And then flashing or bright signs, if the commission does not want to define the inside of a window sign as being a sign for the exterior, does it want to make exceptions for flashing signs that might, like a strobe light or something, a neon sign that flashes, that might be, the commission might think differently about that as opposed to a paper sign or a poster or something. So those are things to think about. These are kind of some of our suggestions at the moment. Again, Matthew mentioned that there's no, he doesn't feel the commission wants to just come down hard on all the businesses downtown, or that it wouldn't be reasonable or make a lot of sense to do that. And so it might make more sense to put some immediate changes into the code to make so that basically all, or at least most of the signs have potential to be okay, or at least more of them. So the first one that we kind of want, that we definitely, all these we want your input in, obviously. It is your decision, but the first one is a little more nebulous in exactly how the number of signs should be counted. So if the commission today wanted to pass an ordinance on, would it be passing an ordinance, Matt, or exactly?
No, they can only make a recommendation.
Make a recommendation for an ordinance. These are some of the options that could be recommended today. Either allowing a number, like 1 sign for each street frontage. Again, that could be defined by 100 feet or 100 yards or however much. Or just a total amount of signage for the entire building, like square footage. And then you need to define which sides of the building are allowed, street frontage versus alley frontage versus neither, if wanted. And then, yes, I mentioned all those. And then again, whether or not you don't have to address that today if you don't want to, but if the commission wanted to rule or make a suggestion about window signs. The other one is a little simpler. We noticed that some buildings have a monumental sign or a pole sign that's exterior, plus signs on the building. There's only a couple of those. We noted some, like the bank and the church, and there's a couple others. So our recommendation would be to allow a pole or monument sign for a business that has the yard space to do so, with requirements to not interfere with sight lines and not be too high, too close to the road. Then the next 2 are exemption or special situations for gas stations and drive-throughs, and then a note that any non-conforming sign could exist for another 10 years. And then just noting that conditional use permits could be applied for variances as applicable. We can talk about this slide. This is probably the slide that you might want to talk about more today. But just to note, there's a lot of things we did not talk about. And so we would recommend, if the commission feels appropriate, to look at things like consolidating the ordinances about signs into one location and referencing them from the other parts of the code, defining terms like temporary sign, directional sign, all these other things, specifying the requirements for all these different types of signs that we're defining, and then clarifying the vague concepts like how directional signs should be used, or the temporary sign idea, or which zones get what thing, etc. So,
And we do have chapter 29 on signs and billboards, but it really has, it says it doesn't address any of these things. It basically says you have to get a permit, and so in any district you have to get a permit, and then there's a requirement that the city administrator or engineer, examine the site, make sure that the accuracy of the representation is made in the application, and it will not be detrimental to the public safety, the public health, or the public welfare. If not, I shall issue.
And then in addition to that, there are scattered references through the zoning code and actually a couple other places for temporary signs and other kinds of signage. But again, so a fair actually, Matt had me look at a couple of different cities around, look at 6 or 7 cities, and almost all of them have their signage code in one place. Like all of these we're talking about, they have it all in one place. So it does help, makes it easier to know where to go. And then when you get to distinguishing between the zones, for example, from Harrisonville, am I saying it right, Harrisonville?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. They describe all the requirements and definitions for the signage in their main section, and then they have an appendix that says for each, they have like Excel little sheet saying, for this zone there's this one, for this zone there's this one, for this zone there's this one. So they go through all the definitions, all the explanations, everything that's important to clarification, and they simply have a little chart that says in this zone you get that. And then all the zones, when they're talking about it, they reference the signage section.
That's one of the things I did like about the Harrisonville is a suburb of Kansas. It's a distant suburb of Kansas City. It's been a small farming town that has sort of, as Kansas City has grown south and east, it's gotten more like a suburb. It's on Highway 7. Good. They have a nice picture of everything that they define, and they make it clear what it is, what each thing refers to. I don't think that it would make sense in many places, especially Centralia, to get into. The trouble is you have to get into the details a little bit, or there's so many different exceptions. So I like to move forward with making sure that it's clear that you can have more than one sign in B1, lest all these run afoul of the letter of the law. And then we do already have a height limit in B1 of 25 feet. That already exists. You do not have to have any setback in B1. And we may not want to mess with the getting additional height as you move back, because the extreme mark sign is right on the is almost on the lot line, and I don't know what.
That's what probably would contradict what you said here. Yeah.
Right.
So that we could leave that out. And then the allow one sign per frontage, or
We need to define that because some buildings are really wide. So.
and then and basically say that if the signs are gathered together, they can, like the True Value Ritchie sign. I could see it, even though they're technically two pieces, they go together. Now, Progressive Insurance versus another one on the side of Angels, I don't know, but he's got 2 frontages. And anything you got up there would be clearly allowed to exist for additional 10 years, so nothing would be illegal for at least 10 years. And that would give us some time to review it.
However, if you do put a sunset on, how long they can maintain that, it could cost the city in the long run. It could be considered a taking.
If you, well, the reasonable standard will apply a sign. What's the life of a sign? Signs of that size are probably, I think you can, I don't know, you have to American weigh in here, but there's you could extend the length of time, but if you give them a length, my understanding is that if you give a long enough lead time, you could consider that you've given them time to amortize the value of the sign. It would not therefore be considered a taking. I would say 10 years would be, minimum. Unless, you say 10 years for detached sign, or 10 years for attached sign and longer for a detached sign, because one of those signs that you hang on the True Value Ritchie sign is probably,
Probably been there longer.
Well, it's been a long, well, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be more expensive
Yeah.
than the little, the smaller signs.
So I do have pictures. Well, I mean, I don't know how much discussion you guys want to talk about this today, but if you want to see a certain business, I can pull it up for you. So, my pictures aren't the best though, but I do have pictures of each one. So, in B1.
So, first question is, is what the board would want, the commission would want to recommend to the board to be put into an ordinance, the B1 district, to clarify the current disagreement, and then separate motion if you guys decide you would like to look further into it, with some guidance as to what you are interested in looking at, if anything.
So you can pull up any business?
If you want.
You can pull up mine.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
And tell me the name again.
Centralia Barbershop.
There it is. Okay, so these are some scattered pictures. Let's.
So according to what I'm understanding, the large sign is not considered a sign because it's behind the glass and not attached to the glass, correct?
Okay, well, at the moment, we don't have a definition on that.
That's
so-
what,
That's what I'm suggesting.
That's a suggestion.
Yeah, suggestion is we ignore everything behind the glass at the
Okay,
moment.
so the sign on the door, because the stickers are on the outside of the glass, that's a sign.
That would count. And then
Barber
your,
pole, because it indicates there's a barber shop,
that's true. So he'd still have two signs. We only give him one at the moment.
and
So.
open, close doesn't count, because it doesn't have a barber anymore, right?
Well,
If you go,
the barber pole is more of a symbol though.
That's
But it's
included
still
in
sign.
Harrisonville,
Yeah.
anything that
Yeah, but I'm
indicates
saying
there's
we
a
could-
glass there.
We could,
Symbol.
but if
we
you
could
have
leave
two
out the word
businesses, you gotta be
symbol.
allowed two signs, so if you start doing bloodlettings in there, then you just be able to.
Informational sign would, you would, like, open or closed or hours?
Unless I bought an open close sign that had a barber pole on it, that'd be the logo, according to their.
It depends on how we want to define it.
Glass, so
So.
it's not a sign.
Open and close, I mean, obviously, to me, we need to create a category where open and close and hours of the business are not included. And if, you know, entrance, exit, if you had two
It would be
doors.
similar to like directions at a bank,
Right.
drive through or
Right.
whatever.
Or fire exit or anything, or such.
Right. But if Lee Allen won the lottery and decided, I'm gonna put this in signage, would it be offensive to Centralians if he took the rest of the face of his building and put in a bright, LED where he's, you know, flashing pictures of him cutting people's hair, you know, in a series of,
I don't remember
Animated
You know,
shorts.
so-
animated,
code better than I do, but I do remember when I did put the barber pole up 30 years ago, it had to be a certain height and couldn't extend over the sidewalk so far. Because I wanted to put a sign at one point that stuck out over the sidewalk. I knew that's probably illegal and advised.
8 feet. The assumption
Unless
is
it's,
no one.
unless it's an awning.
That's this right here.
So that way people don't hit their head.
Is the bottom. An attached sign should not extend more than 1 foot,
So a
et
person
cetera, et cetera.
6'10"
Right.
and is wearing 6-inch heels would still be safe.
So the barber pole was legal because because it was over 8 foot, but in the sign that's longer than a foot could not stick out, even if it's above the 8 foot.
Right.
Right.
Unless it's on a canopy or an awning,
Unless it's a canopy or an awning, yeah.
according to this.
Right.
Again, though, if all of signage is reviewed, changes can be made to that as well. I mean, so. But yeah, so that brings up a good question, though. I mean, depending how you want to define sign, there's actually, you know, a fair amount of these small businesses have two signs like this. I mean, for example, let's. Actually, they only have one sign. Beck only has one sign. Angels has one sign there and one sign on the glass. I don't know if that's inside or outside, but if it's outside, I mean, that's kind of a wide building. It has multiple pieces to it that don't even look connected, and so that could be allowed because it's on the two ends, so you know that it's all the same thing. So the commission could say two signs are acceptable. You know, that could be the minimum. or maximum, I guess. But
Well, I would have a little bit of a problem if a business wanted to expand and buy a building next door and then say, no, you can't have any more signs, you have to take the signs that are there from this other business off and can't put anything there. That might be, and that's what you were talking about, certain widths and stuff. But
well, like this
I
one,
look at
this
it
is
where
3 different
right
lots.
Right.
Angels right here owns these 3 different lots, and they're all connected through the store. And so, depending how we define business and frontage and how many signs, this only 1 or 3 or 2.
And then in the perimeter, the building between the grocery store and the Extreme Mart, there are you could have 1 to 4 different buildings with different addresses there. They've got 2 now, and the idea is to add a 3rd. So obviously, you would need to have a sign for each business. I mean, that's.
No.
Now, I wouldn't.
Sorry, you don't get one.
I mean, we wouldn't want 3 more poles. I would think that it would be a bad idea. Now, somewhere in here, you would think that common sense would take over. If you had 3 pole signs right next to each other, you couldn't see the middle one. But and there's an expense to signs too. So.
Could you back out a little bit? I'm not picking on this business at all, but underneath the Sinclair sign is a sign promoting
There's 2 actually.
well, that's different. The one underneath Sinclair sign is promoting that building, the business with the white car in front of it. So is that a temporary sign? Is that
I would say it's a temporary sign. We'd have to define it as such, but
What if they decided, like a lot of strip malls, to add signs in between the 2 posts?
yeah, see, I think that's for a strip mall to have a sign with multiple different businesses advertised would be ideal. Because you don't, so as to allow each business to have, because this is not a standard 0 lot line,
the bank on this? I know it's zoned differently, but that's like the school board and the bank is what you're talking about.
Right, you got Highway B2 out there,
Yeah, new
but
Yeah.
there at Remington
Yes.
Drive,
Yes.
next to Subway, is a big sign
Yes.
with all
That's
of them.
another one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are, I have no problem with that even downtown, because this, the other thing you could do is zone it B2, but I'm not sure that that's a good solution.
A point on this one is if the city defines who's allowed to get signs by per business, that would solve the problem of whether they're not allowed to sign at all, right? It's per business, each business gets a sign. Kind of like how Radio Shack has a sign, they have a different business license than Kincaid's Pharmacy, right? So if that's the way the city wants to define it, then each business can have whatever is appropriate for that business.
And I really don't see anything in Centralia that I just look at and say, oh my gosh, that ruins the view. We haven't had anything yet where anyone's put up anything really obnoxious, to my mind.
And again, I think lots of signs look cool. So 5 or 6 signs, the building should be great. But that's just me. I'm not really.
But if you're gonna go with something like this, then I think, instead of allowing each person to have a pole, I think this should be utilized, top to above their doors, like these 2 are, and they can have one up in below the Sinclair sign. That way, you don't have to, eliminate having multiple poles out there.
Technically, under ownership, that sign may not be part of that building.
No, it's not a part of that.
No, that's supposed to be part of the other one.
So let's say they sell their gas station, maybe a million signs on that pole.
You could mandate
You have to have these.
You'd have to make an arrangement.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Hey, you rent space.
That-
Yeah, that's true.
What other buildings do you guys want to see in B1? You guys are more familiar with town than I am. What do you want to see? If you want to see anything else.
I think that everything else is particularly.
Okay.
If you go back to Angels real quick,
Which angles?
I'm sorry,
What
the insurance.
The insurance?
Yeah. Well, but that's the one the interesting thing about if a new business moved into one of those buildings, we certainly would if Angels shrunk and something new moved in, we'd certainly want them to have. Okay, so those are, and I'm not trying to pick on Jet, but this is one that's interesting because he's got 5 outside signs if you count
Well, plus this and that and this and this.
If you
and
count
that,
the
that.
animated display sign separate from his main sign, and each one of those businesses, Progressive and Acuity, and I don't remember what the other one is. Those are technically different businesses, but those are all companies that he represents, and there's really, in terms of the city business license, if we even have I'm trying to remember if we get the business license, really one. So,
Yeah, so it's if we're counting business licenses or counting
so
operating.
he would be allowed two because he has a frontage. He's on a corner. He's a corner lot, so you need to identify yourself on each side. But
Unless we're allowing 2 signs per frontage, like we mentioned.
yeah,
So.
Well, does he get 3 signs since he's actually got 3 signs?
But if we're counting frontages, though, it's only 2 streets.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
good question, though.
You make an octagonal building.
You get more signs.
Yes. I remember going over this when I was in Columbia, and you can get lost in the weeds pretty quick.
Yeah.
So let's if we don't get lost in the weeds, if we want to go back to the suggestions that we were talking about for today, the first point is kind of the complicated one, right? Because we need to define, or the commission needs to define which frontages are acceptable. The commission needs to define, well, if it wants to, doesn't have to do anything today technically, but if it wants to define which frontages are acceptable, if it wants to define how wide a building, or what allows 1 versus 2 versus 3 signs, etc. And we're at the point number 1 is mostly talking about attached signs, right? Because point number 2, the second bullet point is kind of we wanted to address the unattached signs, and then Matt was mentioning we should probably just remove that middle phrase there because the height would mess with some of the other signs existing. But so the first one is for attached signs. How does the commission want to look at that?
Yeah.
I think it would be appropriate to bring a product back to the next meeting with some ideas in it.
So the commission wants to take time to think about it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And have the staff kind of develop a ordinance.
So this ordinance right here, this,
Yeah, let's review it. And that way we have something that we can line through and.
well, at the moment, we just put this in fancy lawyer speak. I mean, so we need some guidance before that, though.
We'll work on the staff by having them consolidate all the sign ordinances into one area.
Yeah, yeah.
So move everything with references from the zoning codes into chapter 29, which is the sign.
I would note, though, if we want to do that, I mean, that would, it's kind of scattered, and so that would be, if we're going to do, if we want to do that, we might as well review all of it at the same time, so not to waste the effort. And so that would be a larger goal. That's why at the moment the staff was thinking of suggesting these, or similar to these, temporary, well, not temporary, but these ordinances that would solve part of the problem, and then do the resorting as part of the comprehensive looking at all the different things we're talking about. At least that was a suggestion at the moment, unless he wants to do it in 3 parts.
Matt, is there any urgency on that current sign application?
Well, it hasn't come yet, but what they want to do is put a flush mount sign on the open space, and then they want to have a pull mount sign, which they're either going to put just the new business or the 3 businesses that are in that strip mall, that small strip mall.
You know, the prospects of the city denying that would be hard to defend, I would think. I mean, I feel like that cat's out of the bag. That there's enough businesses out there already that have that sort of signage that, you know, if we deny that, I feel like we're picking on those
I agree. That's kind of what I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out, but by the same token,
As long as you pick up right people, it's okay.
Well, without picking, there again, I hate saying that because it looks like I'm picking on somebody, and that's not my intention at all. Me personally, I have a problem with a sign that's stuck in close to city right away. A piece of paper or plastic, or I would consider it temporary, something that's not painted or lighted or built permanently. To me,
I think
it's
that's
not
the
appealing,
one,
aesthetically appealing. How's that?
the one thing that I do hear people complain about in town is the 1-800 weight loss kind of signs or whatever. I don't know if we've had that one particularly.
The houses.
Well, and this
We
is
buy
just,
houses.
this isn't just B1 I'm talking about. I'm talking about them down Highway 22.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not expecting to speak particularly of any one business, but, you know, just to go out in front of your $1 million business and stick a paper sign, to me is, I guess it works, they would do it.
Yeah, you have to go. So you can only take common sense so far. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, we could.
You know,
For July meeting.
Mike Kincaid, you know, the signs, the flags that you show in front of his business, he takes those down every day.
If he takes them down, then he'd be following. I mean,
Yeah.
as far as it seems, there's a temporary take them down at the end of their business.
Aesthetically,
day,
to me, it's not pleasing, but it's his business, and he's doing the race taking it down like he's supposed to. He's going to maintain it, take care of it, not letting it blow down the street or, you know, whatever else.
Yes.
And there again, what public property, city
If you're talking
right
about
away,
that's technically in the city right away, it's on the,
but a lot of the
using the,
temporary signs, whether they're brought in on a trailer or stuck in the ground, that grass, I'm assuming is city right away.
They're on public drive.
When the Kiwanis Club sets up a sign saying Pancake Day this way today.
They put it on private property.
Well, now we have to have an exception in there that says that Kiwanis gets to have their sign in 3 days.
And I haven't actually touched those signs, so I'm cultural in those.
Or at least we have to have an exception for nonprofits to allow them to do
I
that.
don't
That is
think your job
possible.
is what I'm saying, because to me, it's, oh, man.
Yeah. How about for the short term, that we bring back an ordinance that makes it clear that you can have both a attached sign and a detached sign in B1? And just leave it at that for now, or signage in B1.
Well, you don't have to do anything if you want to do that, because technically you can interpret that code either way. At least I could, but
Okay.
I don't know. Mary,
Obviously we leave it. Okay, so if you guys.
Sorry.
So you would like to address at some point.
Nathan, in your research, did you find anybody that wrote their ordinance as signage as like a percentage of the size of their building?
I don't remember offhand. Matt, do you?
I'm just trying to find it here in the. I know that was part of the. When we were talking about Columbia, that was one of the things we looked at. But
Never mind.
no.
Well, you did have a square footage on there, and
Yeah.
then somebody came in and they put letters up there, and they counted the square inches of each letter, and,
Well, that's a neat thing about it, and I don't know if Columbia's fixed that, but the
Yeah, they
Harrison bill, said they gave a very specific example.
I can find that for Harrison
Yeah.
Mills.
I believe that they do have, and I can't find it real quick, but the have a part of their ordinance has to do with the percentage for wall signs. It's a percentage of the side of the building, and then the size. I mean, you could just simply say for everyone you can have this much signage per linear foot of a frontage. We could come up with something like that, so that Ritchie's could have more signage than the barber shop, which would make sense.
Because I'm thinking of Jed's insurance company. I mean, it's a huge building.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are 5 or 6 signs up there, but
Right.
as a
doesn't cover much of the.
it's like you don't hardly even notice it.
Right. Right. And in fact, when you start doing this, wow, there really are. I don't know if you guys are having the same reaction, but you know, it didn't, I didn't realize how much was out there. 'Cause really, I don't, like I said, there's nothing there's no sign in Centralia that hangs off the side of the building in advertising payday loans with neon. At this point, there's no sign that, you know, it's like strobe effect saying, you know, tattoos here.
I would certainly hate to get our B1 sign ordinance so restrictive that it further hampers any sort of new businesses coming downtown, because that's the opposite of what we want.
Agreed.
But we also want to make sure it's not too overly outrageous. You know.
Right. Because so far nobody's done anything really stupid to find that balance. But, you know, that doesn't mean it won't ever happen. I mean, I guess stupid and ugly is, you know, relative terms, and I'm using those as all.
Yeah.
In the minutes, I might not put those words in there, but, you know, it's
Aesthetically pleasing.
exactly. What's the famous quote about adult material? There's a word that begins with P for it. I don't know, you know, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I know when I see it. Well, we can't write a sign ordinance like that, unfortunately. If it offends Lee Allen because he's the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, then you can't do that. Not that Lee Allen should be bringing arbiter.
But if you just say in the ordinance that the city administrator must be reasonable, and then you follow that with saying that the city administrator is assumed to be right, and will interpret this.
So it's okay as long as the city administrator does not lead, and then like the Planning and Zoning.
As long as the city administrator is reasonable, it's okay.
Okay.
But you have to be reasonable.
So if I brought back a draft, or Mary, can they make a recommendation for language and then have a planning and then a public hearing in front of the Board of Aldermen and then pass it, or do they have to approve the draft They don't have to approve the draft ordinance. Is that correct?
I would say that's probably correct.
Okay. So you could send a recommendation that the staff draft an ordinance for approval by the Board of Aldermen that allows for both attached and detached signage in B1 that meets the height and other restrictions. And then we can work on the rest as at a future date.
Is that what you want? That's what you would like?
That's what I would like.
I'm okay with that.
I'll make the motion and we do that.
Okay.
Can we hear that again? I apologize.
No, you can go for it.
That we allow for both attached and detached signage for a business in the B1 district, provided it meets all height and other restrictions.
So really, we only change one, or to and.
Yes, that's all we're doing. That would be a very limited change, and then we could address anything else. And then if we did say perhaps a motion such as that, and I guess you have.
We have.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll shut up because we have a motion on the floor.
That's all right. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed?
All right, and is there anything else that the Planning and Zoning Commission would like us to pursue further to bring back recommendations? And I think I heard the chairman talk about a better definition on temporary signs throughout the city, not just in B1.
That's correct.
Is that close?
Yeah.
And you're talking about like the portable signs like McDonald's puts out occasionally and Workman has out and.
Yes.
Well, and even the.
Those are a different zone, not B1, but I think
It
it's.
said B2, didn't he?
Well, he said, Lee
in
Allen was talking about all districts, basically. I mean, and I'm not saying that we ban them. I'm
Yeah,
just saying that, and maybe we have a stricter, you know, a higher, that we're more strict in residential and certainly and The only thing I can imagine that we would allow in terms of, we do allow right now in residential, for rent and for sale signs are, you can't limit them because of state law. There's an exemption for essentially setting out a vote here sign. And
You can have for rent, for sale. This is R1. You can have a contractor sign when the contractor is working on the house. For a public or nonprofit, sorry, ignore the colors, but for a public or nonprofit institution, you can have an unattached pole or monument sign in R1 already for a nonprofit. Church, or et cetera,
yeah.
Public building. You can have garage sale signs as long as it's on the premises. Then you can also have an unilluminated directional sign if there's a location that has like a voting or something.
And you also have
And like
a
that's it,
small
though.
sign for a home-based business.
Yeah, it's really small. Yeah, it's right here. You can have a window display or sign less than a foot square if it's a physician, dentist, surgeon, dressmaker, musician, or artist, or other home occupation.
Not including barbers.
Yeah, it says no barbers or musicians. Sorry, you can't be an R1. Or at least you can't advertise in R1.
Back in the day when you guys did surgeries.
Yeah.
And then it says no somewhere else, but yeah. Other than what we've talked about, you've seen the code, there's almost nothing else about signs.
So, other than temporary signage, are there other issues that you guys, and mentioned consolidating to one ordinance? Yeah, to one.
Do you want it sooner than later? My question, sorry, I don't know everybody's names, I apologize. Do you want that done, would you prefer that done sooner than later? Was that the?
I would think so.
That's laughing at me. There's an answer to a question we had earlier on the screen there about how to measure a sign. This is from the Harrisonville code. This is how they did it. They draw it out and they show you how they define with one and then 2 pictures. So drew it out. They currently are drawing it.
Columbia had to do that after the title loan company put up a sign and they counted the square inches of the sign itself.
Yeah. Was that?
That was the title loan company that caused that. Because they had square footage.
Right.
And if you just measured the letters, and they were within that. So they redefined it, so it was the background or whatever fit that. Those letters.
Motion passed. I'm assuming we'll close public hearing before we go to comprehensive plan.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
You asked about other issues, and what I don't know is, I was out of the loop really on all this until I read about this. But there is a United States Supreme Court case that deals with signs and zoning, and I don't know the particulars except there it has been discussed, though not Harrisonville and not Boone County have not implemented their zoning code to provide for this. So it's been in the last couple of years. Township is the name of the case. It's part of the name of the case. I don't know the other parts of it, but it has been discussed in legal circles. I'll put it that way. So probably that needs to be incorporated in what you're dealing with. And I don't have the particulars of this.
Is that? I know there have been several cases. I don't know if Township was one of them, which specifically says that there's no difference between commercial speech or there's very little difference between commercial speech and private speech, and there's also some, basically, sign ordinances have little or no leeway when it comes to the content of signs, but the size, and, I mean, there's, and which is freedom of speech argument, a freedom of speech issue. So the tricky part comes to when you're talking about what's a directional sign versus what's a, when can you allow, if you allow an off-premise directional sign, do you then have to allow off-premise other signs? But these, there have been some, I think there have been some exceptions, but yes, I'm aware of the township case, but I could address it specifically in the future. Okay.
So we're moving along?
Yeah. Okay, so we approved that, and then temporary signage, consolidating, and what was there anything else that we, and this sort of generally defining what a sign, and basically what the main points that we covered tonight, right? Is there anything you don't want us to look at? Okay, all right.
Can I have access to your information?
Yeah,
Email, what's the easiest way to do it?
whatever you want.
Is that on the city
I
access?
have, it's on, yeah, my files are on the city server at the moment. I have, and I can show you later when you want to access them. I have an Excel spreadsheet with all my numbers of what signs I counted, then I have all the pictures, and I have the PowerPoint.
I'll talk to you.
That's basically what you need, so thank you all.
Comprehensive plan?
In the memo, I mentioned that we have a opportunity to work with the Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission to assist with staffing on a plan. I have a proposed timeline in the packet as well, in the memo. And again, we haven't actually adopted a comprehensive plan since '87, but that doesn't mean that we haven't done any planning since then. We do have the opportunity to make this with the assistance of the Regional Planning Commission and a slightly more open process and incorporate more people into the process, which I think would make it more of a community plan, which I think has a definite advantage. Also, if nothing else, you will have more people of the community educated to the what the city is doing and what the city is looking at doing in the future with their input. So the first step would be, and I think Tim was down talking to Ed Sigmund today about this. I haven't had a really good last month with Tim being at work out of town to get some of the so the ground rules all set up. But what we would like to do is to develop a draft of members, which I'll send out to the entire planning commission once I have a chance to talk to Leal and Tim about it. And then we would also like to open it up to applications from the public, although because we need to make this process at the recommendation of the Regional Planning Commission, and it seems like a very reasonable one, to have both aldermen and planning and zoning commissioners active in subcommittees is important, so it becomes a plan of the planning and zoning commission and the board of aldermen, rather than you're handed something from some people and you don't know how they got to those conclusions, and it's harder to, it makes it less adoptable. And it's also more of a chance that they go off in a direction that is not of the most importance to the city. That you get lost, spend all the time talking about signage or something. You know, it's not. But there's other things that anyway, so with that, we probably only have one, maybe two seats for the public on each of these, on each of the 4 subcommittees I'm recommending. So I would suggest that we come back again in July with maybe some more information about the signs, and then adopt the full process. At that time, we might bring in MMRPC staff to talk to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to go over it a little bit, select the members of the formally select the members of the committee, and then start moving on with the process. So what I'm looking for right now is just a sort of endorsement of the concept and to prepare a application for people who would like to be part of the comprehensive plan committees. And then I'm recommending that we have 4 committees, and those would be emergency management and community facilities. I could see if you really want, you don't want to get the committee get too big, that one could be split possibly. One for economic development and financing, financial issues. One for land use, transportation planning, and then the 4th one would be utilities and environment. So those are the 4 I'm looking at. And then I would like for you guys to be involved before we have I don't want to announce names for different committees until I get a chance to talk to you guys. But I have an idea of which ones I would like different ones of you guys to serve based on past conversations as well. So I guess is there any additional information you'd like at this point? And if not, I'm just looking for a motion to endorse the idea of recruiting from the public additional members for the committees. In addition, and then combined with recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
So we're finished with the comprehensive plan
Yes.
process.
Yes.
As may arise.
I have well, I take it back. I do have a very small one. We got another. The company that wants to build that tower, that antenna, utility pole. Thank you. Monopole. Has come back with the essentially same application and say that they think that's a good application. So. I think they at least have to get a building permit, a excavation permit for excavating the right of way, and I believe they would need to get a conditional use permit. Go over that with Mike.
Just for clarification on my part, again, if I understood the last meeting correctly, they can come back a year from now and ask for a permit to build one 10 feet across from that one.
We have very limited right to.
We got a notice at the Historical Society that the railroad is also placing 2 communication towers. Did you get that one?
I saw that. I don't think they're nearly. I think they're not nearly as tall.
Yeah.
They may be 25 or.
I couldn't really figure out why we got a notice at the Historical Society.
They are searching. One of the things they have to do is look for that they are not damaging any cultural, or it's part of the federal process.
Which not disrupting any burial grounds or something like that.
So if we have a historical power pole, we could prevent them from putting it on that because it's historical?
If you can make it, if it's the power pole that Jesse James shot while he was here in 1865.
First 180 chance anchored.
There you go. There you go.
Or the 10th.
Now,
Or the height, yeah.
if you cancel the Southern Line that's applying for that, the idea is to work on and I can't remember the jargon for it, I apologize, but basically, smart rail, basically where they have communication to avoid accidents. So, I'm not trying to advocate for it, but that's the purpose.
So there's a safety nexus to it.
There is a safety nexus.
I'm all in favor of not picking up the problem, I think.
All right, I concur.
We're going to run any of our buildings.
Yes.
Any other discussion?